So on foreign policy, I just want to ask one more question. So there are really two big thrusts, it seems to me, to Obama foreign policy. One was this strategic pivot, Afghanistan, Iraq. But the second one was the feel-good agenda. And so we have the president telling the Muslim world in Turkey that he grew up in a Muslim-majority country. We had a book exchange and a handshake with an erstwhile devil, Hugo Chavez from Venezuela, and we had a YouTube video to the Iranian people. Two questions about that. How do you think the feel-good agenda, the global feel-good agenda, is playing at home in the US? Do Americans support this? And second, what do you think it's buying him abroad? I was struck by the fact that no amount of Obama love fest in Europe was enough to generate any fiscal stimulus dollars or any more troops for Afghanistan. So do the American people want Obama to be out there talking to the enemies, broadly understood? And do you think it's smart policy for him?
The first part is easy. Yes, we feel a lot better about ourselves. All of the objective indicators of our well-being at home and abroad are worse, not better. And yet, there's been more than a fourfold increase in the percentage of Americans who feel the country is headed in the right direction. We're optimistic, more optimistic about the economy. We believe that we're less reviled around the world. We've noticed the reaction of publics in countries across the globe, and frankly, it makes us feel better. So the answer is, yeah, get him out there more. He's damn good at it, and we like it, and we feel good about having a president who's intelligent, informed, articulate, and not so arrogant as to say my way or the highway, that he listens. I mean, it really is a leadership style. It is not proselytizing. It's not sort of demanding things that effectively he can't have delivered to him. It's starting a somewhat different approach. I think it's gone over exceedingly well around the world and domestically, and I think out of this will come some openings and possibilities that would have been more difficult with a continuation of the Bush regime, or had John McCain been elected president. So, okay, that's number one. But let me get to your first one. I think it reflects a kind of a cynicism and an impatience about, okay, where are the goods? You know, you're going to deliver. I mean, the guy's been in office 110 days. You're expecting to remake the world in 110 days? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen like that. It's not going to be immediate trades and suddenly European countries that have no stomach for sending troops to Afghanistan are suddenly going to change their mind, that their domestic politics are going to change as a consequence. No, it's not going to work like that. So that, I mean, my view is we'll see. But he's identified the hot spots. He's assembled an exceedingly competent national security team. With the delay in the confirmation of political appointees, he appointed some special envoys to make sure we let no time pass. We didn't let 7 years pass before re-engaging in Israeli-Palestinian matters. We're in touch with Syria and trying to nurture that relationship with Israel. We're beginning an effort that may prove futile of diplomatic overtures to Iran, but it sure as hell is more encouraging than giving Israelis a sense that, okay, if you feel you got to take them out, try to take out the nuclear weapons, that's okay. That is so frightening to think about the consequences of that in the decades that of fallout, even though I understand this is an existential issue with Israel. It seems to me the administration is deeply engaged in foreign policy in spite of the fact that the president faces the worst economy since the Great Depression, managing a financial stabilization and a recession, massive budget deficits, which, unlike here, sort of Rudd inherited some surpluses. Obama inherited huge deficits, which 8 years earlier had been surpluses, and which Alan Greenspan was so worried that we'd pay down the national debt. He said, by all means, let's have a series of tax cuts. He was afraid we'd pay down all the debt and the government would have to buy equity in the private sector corporations. That's a frightening possibility, isn't it? Let's see, GM, Chrysler, AIG, Citibank, Bank of America. Yeah, we bought equity and we have even larger national debt.
Okay, so let's talk about the other part of the domestic agenda. I think it's now, maybe in Australia as well as the US, the unofficial mantra of these centre-left governments is don't let a good crisis go to waste. I think Rahm Emanuel said that in an unguarded moment after the election. So we have in the Obama, Obama is not only engaged in global financial crisis fighting, he wants to expand healthcare coverage to the 50 million Americans who don't have it while lowering costs for everybody. He wants to end America's addiction on imported oil with, among other things, a pretty serious cap-and-trade regime to fight climate change. And he wants to turn American schools from the lowest performing schools in the OECD to some of the best. The price tag in the budget is $3.5 trillion in 1 year. The public debt, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, projects the public debt to more than double in the next decade, from 40% of GDP to over 80%. They also project that even way out there in 2018, the federal budget deficit will be 5% of GDP. So this is revolutionary stuff. Do you think Obama can transform the United States towards something that's going to look more and more like European social democracy and less like Reagan Revolution America? Do you think he can actually execute this agenda?
That's a big, long, and important question, and virtually all of the premises in it I agree with. Absolutely true. The question you have to ask, and do presidential and congressional scholars know what they're talking about when they recommend the limited focused agenda, when they generalize from Jimmy Carter in particular and to some extent Bill Clinton in losing control of the focus and weakening himself? Put that together with the fiscal constraints, and does that mean it's pure insanity to push ahead with one's campaign agenda in the face of the economic crisis and the cost associated with it? Let me just say, the elements of his agenda that were related to the campaign are a small part of the growing deficits and debt. Most of that is a function of the dramatic downturn in revenues from the economic recession, the cost of the bailout, and the cost of the stimulus. But you're absolutely right. He's adding on to it. The question first you ask is, well, what's the alternative? Should he have said, okay, when I first ran, I didn't anticipate this financial meltdown and economic recession. Everything is off the table. I will spend 100% of my time managing the economic crisis. Now, the implications of that would be he'd lose the support of most of his Democrats in the Congress, who have already been working very hard on health care, on energy and climate change, on education reform. You know, they're a legislative body, and they're moving ahead, and have been setting the way for much of this action. Could he really sort of pivot after 2 years or 3 years, praying he gets some recovery enough to say, okay, now we're going to do this and that? Take health care. You know, long term, our deficits have everything to do with the fact that we are running, spending 17% of GDP on health compared to 9.5% here in Australia. And the growth curve is just terrifying. It will move soon to 20, and it's not just a public finance problem, it's a societal problem. You may say, well, societies can choose to spend 30% of their GDP on health care, but, you know, it's going to detract from other things and actually change. So we have to transform that system. You know, it's hard to imagine that trend continuing. In fact, one of my favorite lines is from that great, since departed Republican economist Herb Stein. It was the wittiest of all. And Herb, one of his many great lines was, if a trend can't continue, it won't. Okay? So something is going to happen. The question is what the effects of it are if we just let it go on and we pay the price of having an abrupt adjustment. So if you realize that's the issue, you better get started. Well, how do you get started on beginning to control healthcare costs? You know, most importantly, you're going to have to start moving away from reimbursing services, discrete services, because you have incentives built up to prescribe more services and pharmaceuticals and the rest. And so the efforts that have been talked about and underway in Australia are also underway in an experimental way with bundling services and treatment in ways that providers have different kind of incentives. Well, I don't know how much you can save in the short run, but we also know if we don't begin to get everyone under some kind of a plan, that the cost shifting will continue and our chances of getting control of this are really limited. So you got to go at it in a big way. Is he going to succeed? Probably not with the whole deal. But he's said often he believes in the power of persistence. You know, 90% of life is just showing up. You just keep working at it, and if he gets some pieces of this in place. Not everything. We don't get to universal service right away, but we start some fundamental changes in the insurance market. We eliminate the cherry picking. There's broad agreement on some of the things we can begin to do among the shareholders. If we get it started in a sufficiently intelligent way, then it's quite possible that will create a new platform that will allow us to take the second and third step. So rather than, and by the way, the private sector will retain a huge role in this. This is not. I mean, you can make an argument that ours has the lowest cost benefit ratio in terms of our expenditures, but path dependence is real. We're not going back. We're not going to have a single payer system, and in fact, most other countries are adding private insurance onto their systems and altering it. But we're going to get started. Cap and trade, no, he won't get anything out of this in this environment of any seriousness. He'll pump more money into renewable energy R&D and may even get a sort of empty emissions trading mechanism approved that has no consequences. But it says we're going to move in this direction and finesse it and try to have something to say. Whatever we say in Copenhagen will be more encouraging to the rest of the world than what we've said in international meetings over the last 8 years. Education reform, yeah, the money's there. It's not going to break the bank. The things we have in mind, we got a real battle. We have demonstrated that direct public student loans are much less expensive than going through these private loan providers. We've experimented with this. We know it's true, but there's a political fight ahead. Will he win it? I think so. I think that's one he can pull off, and so I think we're going to get more money for access to higher ed, and I think this worrisome flattening out and then modest decline in the percentage of high school graduates going on to college will change. And he got in almost $2 billion of discretionary money into the stimulus for Secretary of Education to use as carrots to advance the reform effort. And he's got a real reformer in that job from California who's married to an Australian and played basketball down here. So
and of course, the education is maybe a good place to go to the last question I wanted to ask you. So I wanted to ask you this question, but I have to come up with my own quotation about the future now, which is Niels Bohr, the Nobel laureate physicist, who, what did he say? Prediction is difficult, particularly about the future. So the prediction question is, I want to know if Kevin Rudd is right. Kevin Rudd said that 30 years of neoliberalism ended in 2008 with the global financial crisis and the election of Barack Obama. Do you think the US is now looking, is this a moment that's going to lead to 30 years of an Obama revolution? Does that mean that the Republicans are now the natural minority party? Obama's won the Latinos. The only way the Republicans can come back is to be like Bill Clinton, that is to tilt to the center, not to the left. Is this a generational shift, or is it all about Obama and his unique qualities as a president?
I wish I knew the answer to that question. Simon, we're wrestling with it already, and the simple answer is that it could prove to be very short-lived. You could, first of all, I just have a general assumption that a sustained global recession, depression will lead to all governments being thrown out of power, whatever the incompetence of their oppositions. So if things get bad enough, he won't have an opportunity to seize the opportunities that the advantages that are now there, and they are substantial. And frankly, it began before Obama. It had a lot to do with the reaction to Bush, especially in his second term. There has been a steady decline in the number of Americans identifying as Republicans. Not a great surge in those identifying as Democrats, but you assign the independent leaners to their respective parties, and Democrats have opened a substantial advantage. It's also the case that they are doing well where the electorate is growing. In 1992, 12% of the electorate was non-white. In 2008, it was double that. That segment of the electorate is disproportionately Democratic. Even Asian Americans, who used to have somewhat of a Republican tilt, are now voting as Latinos are, and they're above 2/3 plus. Yeah, African Americans moved from 90 to 96% Democratic because of Obama and turned out higher. But in general, you take the youngest cohort, and remember, those who came of age politically under Reagan became Republicans in many respects, and it helped maintain conservative power for a long period of time. They are disproportionately identify as Democrats, and their broader sentiments on policy and politics and cultural issues and the rest suggest Democrats will do well. And that was well in evidence before Obama came on the scene. He is now the frosting on the cake because he does have genuine appeal and has worked hard there. If you look at sort of high-tech areas in large metropolitan parts of the country, you will see enclaves of professionals, very well educated, who are disproportionately aligned with the Democratic Party. So things are, and then if you begin parsing the electoral vote and you see what's been happening in New Mexico and Colorado and Arizona, you begin to understand that the Republican Party, which has dominated our politics for a long period of time, is retreating to the white rural South. Mm-hmm. This is not a winning combination. Moreover, their ideas are not such, the ones they are pressing now, that are likely to serve them well. So I think they're in trouble. But whether that turns, if you will, the animating ideas and sort of overall role of government, whether that transforms it, no, there's real path dependence. We believe in markets and are wedded to them. We still have the highest level of productivity of any country. We got big problems with the shape of our economy and the global economy, massive financial imbalances, and we're going to have to work those out, and it's going to be painful, and we're going to consume less and save more. So huge adjustments are going to have to be made, but government is going to play a steering role in financial regulation. They're going to play an important role in trying to take our utterly bankrupt urban school systems and in transforming them. They're going to have to do the same thing in moving this incredible ocean liner of a healthcare system, because it's not going to happen naturally through markets. And similarly, they're going to have to bring some dependability and predictability to sort of pensions as well. So there is a greater role for the U.S. to play, for the government to play under sort of democratic ideas. There's a market for it. How long it lasts, whether it's overwhelmed by events, whether it leads to a long-term Democratic majority, I don't know. But I'd conclude with this. All successful politicians may have great skills and intelligence. Some have those, but what they all have is some luck. Timing is everything. Things out of your control, serendipity. My sense so far is that Obama's a lucky man. And if a little bit of that continues and the worst is avoided, and he performs as we have seen him thus far, he will maintain and build public support. Democrats will benefit, and Republicans will be in the wilderness for a period of time.
Well, I think we should take this opportunity to thank Tom not only for his insight, but for being willing to put up with me so graciously. So I'm at least going to thank you.